All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Eric Coleman with IIST and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar, Improving the Test Process with Measurements by Tom Staub. We're excited you're able to join us today and set aside an hour to attend this webinar. This webinar is one of a series of free webinars to introduce the topics as well as the presenters of the upcoming SQTM conference in San Diego, California, September 13th through the 18th at the Sheraton San Diego Hotel and Marina. The conference focuses on advancing the test management and quality management professions by providing practical methods based on best practices. The ongoing theme of the conference, Practical, Proven, Feasible, keeps the focus on what works. To view the conference program and more information, visit www.qualitymanagementconference.com. Be sure to join us for the next webinar in this series, Improve Lifecycle SQA with Measurements by Tom Staub, on July 16th from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. To learn more about this and other webinars in the series, go to www.qualitymanagementconference.com. You may submit your questions at any time by using your question box in your GoToWebinar window. Today's presenter will answer as many questions within the time allowed at the end of today's session. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available for viewing within 48 hours at www.qualitymanagementconference.com. At the end of today's webinar, you'll be asked to complete a short survey. At IIST, we strive to provide the highest quality educational resources for the public and would appreciate it if you could take a few minutes to complete this short survey. I will now turn the webinar over to today's presenter, Tom Staub. Tom?
Hello, this is Tom Staub, and I thank you for attending. And just for your information, my session is going to be held the first day of the conference, and I'd really appreciate it if you'd attend. I think you'll enjoy the topic. So let's get started. We're talking about measurements and measures. So the first thing I like to do when I come across something like this is to go to my old friendly dictionary, Webster's New World Dictionary, and the definition I get for measure is any standard or validation, comparison, judgment, etc. So, a single attribute of an entity that must be controlled through measurement. That is what we're going to be talking about today, and how can these help in the testing process and help in. Now, IEEE standard 1002 from 1987 says that a measurement standard is a standard that describes the characteristics of evaluating a process or a product. And that's what testing really is all about, is evaluating a process or a product. And in our case, usually it's a product, but it reflects back on the process that was used to develop it. So what are the keys to successful measurement? First of all is establishing the right measures. And that is something that in a lot of cases we don't do. We don't establish the right measures because we're so focused on the testing measures that we forget the other types of measures, and we're going to be talking a little more about those later on in this webinar. Timely feedback. We have to make sure that everybody that needs to know the measures and metrics can get to those in a timely manner. And then we've got to analysis of data. We're real good about collecting measures and metrics, but the analyzation is something that we don't do really well, and we need to get better at it. And only by analyzing the data that we've collected can we really improve the process of testing. So a measure should be capable of predicting process or product parameters, not just describing them. And what I mean by that is that we need to be able to figure out where everything is going on this and what that process or product is going to give us before we even get started. And we usually have enough experience that we can figure that out and predict it. They should be simple and precisely definable. And we pretty well can give simple, precise measures, but they need to be objective also. They need to be easily obtainable at a reasonable cost. It doesn't do us any good to collect measures if it costs us more than their value and the outcome of that value. They need to be valid, and that you're probably thinking, well, duh, yeah, they need to be valid, but you'd be surprised how many measures out there are not valid, and they need to be robust. In other words, we can't have measures that are so focused that they forget about other things. And that's part of helping improve the test process, is by acquiring robust measures. Why measure? Well, it's to provide status updates. You all are always providing status updates. Where are you? How many test cases have you run? What's the outcome of those? People are always wanting to know what the status of testing is. Historical data for analysis. I'll bet you that a lot of you have historical data stored on computers somewhere, and you have not really had a chance to analyze it. It's one of those things that you'll get around to it one of these days, and one of these days never comes. So we need to put that historical data that we're collecting to good use. And measures improve processes. I'm a big process person. Anybody that knows me knows that I like processes. And I believe in Deming's quote that says, if you can't document what you're doing into a process, you don't know what you're doing. So I'm a big process person. I think we need to document what we're doing into a process. But then once we've done that, it's not something that's going to be around for the next 20 years. We need to keep going back, looking at it, and looking, is that process valid? Is it doing what we need? And through measures, we can improve that process, because the measures are going to tell us what is really happening in that process. Measures also help improve quality. And once we know what the baseline quality is, through measures we can look at, if we improve this process, if we get rid of assignable cause errors that we can identify and find out what the root cause is, then we can improve the quality of the process and the quality of the product. Customer satisfaction. Pat Townsend, back in the 1980s, came up with a definition of true quality that I still believe. And I found that the more I look around, the more I do consulting work, the more validity that definition has. He says that true quality is quality of fact plus quality of perception. Well, quality of fact are the measures and the data that we have collected that we can document the quality of a product. The quality of perception is what our customers, our users think the quality really is. And a lot of times that's not going to be documented and statistics that we can validate. Business value is what value does testing bring to the business? And a lot of times we in the testing arena fail to remember that what we're doing has to bring business value. And therefore, we're constantly having to fight for our money, for our dollars, and fight to get enough time to really test the system like we want to. But if we remember that what we're doing has to add value to the business, then once we remember that and start looking at how to document that, then that's going to make our job a little bit easier. And it's to save money. And that goes along with the business value, is we need to show a return on the investment we're making in testing. So the first thing you've got to do is get a baseline for what you're doing now so that you can show an ROI on testing. Another reason we measure is control. We've got to keep the process in control, and our test process has got to be controlled. We need to do self-assessment. And that's the best way to get improvements made, is to be constantly assessing what we're doing and figuring out, is it doing what we intended it to do? Are we truly testing the programs the way they should be tested? And are we doing it in an efficient manner? So we need to have self-assessment in order to give continuous improvement. And we need to look at our measures and figure out, are we measuring the right thing, and are our measures correct? So let's look at measurement. There are two types of measurement. There are objective measurements. They use hard data that can be obtained by counting, stacking, weighing, timing, etc. And that's what you have been collecting, is objective measurements. When Townsend talked about quality of fact, this is what he was talking about, is objective measurements. Now, there are subjective measurements, is normally calculated data. And you calculate this data based on the objective measurements. And I have found that when you're presenting data to management, especially, that you need to use subjective data, because the raw data that we normally produce doesn't mean a thing to them. So what we need to do is to get percentages for them, or whatever works, in order for them to better understand what we're doing and what we're trying to present to them. So let's look at something else, is nominal data can be categorized. It cannot be subjected to arithmetic operations and cannot be ranked. So we can categorize data, but we cannot subject it to math, and it can't be ranked. It's just out there and categorized. Ordinal data can be ranked. but differences or ratios between values are not meaningful. So let's look at home prices. And we look at average home prices. Well, we can rank them. We can tell you what's the highest and what's the lowest, but differences in ratios between the values doesn't have any meaning. It's just that we can rank them. We can tell you what the average is. We can show you what the midpoint is. Interval data can be ranked and can exhibit meaningful differences between values. So we can rank it and we can say, okay, there is on an average a $5,000 difference between one value and the next one. But that may not really present what we need to present with our data. And then we've got ratio data. Has an absolute zero, and meaningful ratios can be calculated. So all of these things have their place in our measures. We have to keep them in mind when we're thinking of our measures. Before being approved for use, subject your measures to the following test. Are they reliable? Is there a consistency of measurement? Are we measuring the same type thing in the same manner? Or are we doing it different every time we take a measure? So it needs to be reliable. Is it valid? The degree to which a measure or a metric actually measures what it was intended to measure. I've heard the old expression that statistics don't lie, but liars form statistics. And you can make data say what you want if you work on it. But you need to be it, because it's going to come down the road sometime when people are going to look at it and say, hey, wait a minute, show me that this is valid. And you're going to have to prove what you're measuring. And you need to do that. Make sure your data is valid before you put it out there. Ease of use and simplicity. To me, this is one of the best things that we need to look at. Is it easy to capture? We don't want to spend a lot of money to capture this data. We need to be able to capture it through a computer program or something, but it needs to be captured easily and not spend a lot of money on it. But it also needs to be displayed in a simple, easy to use way. And we're going to talk about how to do that a little later. So just keep in mind that we need to have it simple. We need to have it easily looked at and used. It needs to be timely. And so therefore, it almost needs to be real time. And the faster you can get that data out there, the more continuously people can look at it, the better off you're going to be. And calibration. What do we mean by that? Well, every now and then we have to go back and recalibrate the measures. We have to go back and relook at our baseline and say, is that baseline still true? And so just like an instrument needs to be calibrated periodically to make sure it's still accurate, we need to go back and recalibrate our measures periodically to make sure they're still valid, reliable, and easy to use and timely. Now, what's the benefits of measures? Well, they show status. We've said that before. But this is one of the important things about measures. They help understand the process. Okay, is the process working the way it should? And are we presenting the data that is helpful to us and to our customers and the stakeholders? Ensure that decisions are based on fact. And that is very true. If it's not based on fact, it's going to come back and bite us. So we need to make sure that our measurements are based on fact and show where improvements are needed. We can improve everything, but how do you know what needs to be improved? Well, the measures are going to show you that. And so we need to have the data and we need to analyze it to see where can we make improvements in the testing process and also in the process that was used to develop the programs or what we're testing. Everything can be improved, and it's our job to help show where those improvements need to be made, not just present the data, because anybody can do that, but you're only doing part of your job. Show if improvements actually happened. So if you say that we need to improve, let's say how we're producing software, and you've worked with the developers and you've come up with an improvement. Well, now you've got to know, did those improvements get made and are they really working? Did it solve the problem that we were trying to solve? So you're part of the solution here because you've got the data. You've got the expertise to know if those improvements really worked. And then reveal problems. Data can reveal problems very simply if you just take the time to look at it. So what types of measurements are we talking about? Well, there's business measures. And we forget the business measures all the time. We are so caught up in our own measurements of the test process that we forget the business measures. And we're going to talk about those in a little bit and how you can make some real good headway if you just keep in mind to think about the business measures when you're collecting them and presenting them. You've got organizational measures. Well, that is measures that span the whole organization. They cover every aspect of the organization, and this is where you get the business value that we talked about before. You've got to show business value in order to really, you've got to show an ROI, which is business value, and you've got to show organizational value in order to really keep your process going in your testing organization valid. You've got project measures. Okay, what's happening on this particular project that we're testing? Testing measures, we're good at that. We know what we can do on that, and we're pretty good on quality measures. Now, let's look at something here. What I found happens is that people are interchanging using the word metric and measures. And they're two different things. So let's look at what a metric really is. It's a quantitative measure of the degree to which a system, component, or process possesses a given attribute. That comes from IEEE Standard 610.12. So a metric is a measure that shows what degree a system or component possesses a given attribute. And so a metric can be usually a percentage of the work done. In other words, you take the measures and you massage it into something else to present. So you've got a measurement is the raw data of what work you've done in test execution. But a metric is what percentage of all of the test cases have been exercised. So a metric shows that. It shows test case execution. It shows defect information. Now, you can show defects in raw data. Okay, we found 16 major defects on this module. And they're going, okay, so you found 16. Doesn't sound so bad. But when you put it into how many lines of code or what your expected defect rate is or a percentage, then it has some meaning. It goes, oh, okay, so that's what you're telling me. So raw data is good, but in order to be a metric, you need to convert it into something that is easily understood. So you've got test coverage also, risk, requirements, and code. So what percentage of the requirements have you tested? What percentage of the risks that you've identified have you tested? How many lines of code have you tested? So it's a percentage. And test milestone dates. So you said you were going to start testing on a certain date. Did you? Are you ahead of schedule? Are you behind schedule? Now let's look at some testing costs. You can't lose track of the cost of testing. Remember, I told you that you have to show a return on investment, which leads us to the next slide. There's a common language in business, and I've broken it into a pyramid here. So the bottom level is lower management or non-supervisors, and their language is things. So how many lines of code have they produced? How many systems have they produced? How many modules have they produced? How many modules have we tested? How many test cases have we exercised? So that is the language of things. Well, when you get to middle management, the middle manager has to be bilingual. And so do you as in testing. You have to be bilingual. You're doing and collecting data or measures in things and raw information. But you also have to keep in mind what upper management is looking at, and upper management is looking at money, pure and simple. So you have to be bilingual. You have to go you have to think things in things, language of things, but you also have to think and keep in mind the money aspect of this whole thing. And this is dollars and cents, and make no, I cannot emphasize this enough, that you cannot lose sight of the money aspect of this whole thing. If you do, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot, and you're going to be constantly justifying what you're doing. And when the schedule gets compressed and it takes longer to develop a module or a system, they're not going to change the implementation date, or it's going to take a lot to get them to change it. What's going to happen? Your testing cycle is going to get cut. So you cannot lose sight of the money aspect. You have got to show that you bring value to the table, and that what you're doing helps the company save money in the long run. So we talked about business measures. So one of the first business measures that I've run across that is very important to senior management is on budget delivery. Did you deliver this system on budget? And if you as testers are contributing to this cost overrun, then you're in trouble. The next one is on-time delivery. And again, because they're a lot of times compressing the testing cycle, then if you insist on taking the time you need to test this system like it should be tested, you're going to be the contributor to delaying the implementation date, and you're not going to make the on-time delivery. So these are two business measures, and if you look at it, both of them go back to money. Just like I told you in the previous slide, you've got to look at the money. Return on investment. Okay, testing is costing us X dollars. Now, what is the benefit of testing? What's the business value? What's the value to our business if we take the time to test a system like it should be tested? The customer satisfaction. Will the customer even notice that they've got a good product? Remember this quality perception. So this is where the customer satisfaction comes in. Is the customer satisfied? What's their perception of the quality of the product? And I'll tell you right now, I've seen systems developed where quality of fact says, we got a good system going here. We developed just what they wanted. Our data shows that it's a good system. And it gets out there to user testing or to actual use. And the customer goes, this stinks. This is not what we wanted. So one of the measures of success, of business success, is the satisfaction of the customer. I travel a lot, and one of the things that I look at when I'm checking into a hotel or to an airline is how many screens that person on the other side of the counter has to go through to get me checked in for a flight or get me a hotel room. I've got a reservation. It should be a simple matter of pulling up my reservation. What do I want? If they haven't already assigned a room, what's available? Giving it to me. But have you ever looked at how many screens the average hotel front desk person has to go through in order to give you your room? It's not an easy process. Well, guess what? We do the same thing. No matter what your business is, we may give them the data, but are we giving it to them in an easily understood and easily used format? And if we're not, the customer is not going to be satisfied. Is it meeting the business partner expectations? Well, our business partner is the one that wanted the system in the first place. So are we meeting their expectations? If we're not, guess what? They're going to be complaining to their bosses and to senior management. So therefore, we've got to show in our measures, that's one of the business measures. Are we meeting their expectations? Are there a lot of problems with it? And just remember that the earlier we can catch the problems, the cheaper it's going to be to correct them. So, are we lacking? Is there a lack of problems? If there is, great. We've done our job, and they've done their job. So, measurement categories: size, lines of code, boxes, how many boxes are being checked, procedures, and units of output. Those are all size. And if you think of it in those terms, then you can look at your measures and say, okay, what's the size are we looking at? Now the next measure is status. And probably all of you have measures on status. So one of the things you need to look at is earned value. And I would almost bet that this is not one of the categories you look at on status. You need to look at it. Amount of work that is done. So you're going to have raw data. How much work have you done? How many test cases have you accomplished? Have you exercised? What percentage of each activity have you accomplished? And the actual cost versus schedule cost. Remember the money aspect. So you have scheduled a cost, and it could be expressed in time. And remember, time equates to dollars. So what's your schedule cost versus what is it actually costing you to do this testing? Amount of work still needing to be done. So you can say, I've done 25% of the work. Well, does that really mean that you've got 75% of the test cases still to go? Well, if you do, what percentage of the time do you have left? Do you have enough time to do all of this remaining work? So you need to correlate the data back and forth to look at it. Effort. This is labor hours. Remember I said you can equate labor hours into dollars. So labor hours broken out by life cycle function in comparison to the scheduled hours. So if we scheduled 1,500 hours and we've used 1,200 hours, but we've only accomplished 30% of the testing, the test cases, we got a problem. So you need to look at labor hours and compare it to your scheduled hours. Schedule, actual completed versus schedule. Projected completion date versus schedule. Has it slipped? And if it has, you better tell people right away. The minute you know it, you better tell them. Quality, the number of defects found. Well, that as a raw number doesn't do much. So you've got to change it into a metric. Mean time between failure. In other words, how long how long are we having to test between finding defects? So if we're taking us a long time to find a defect, maybe we're wasting our money. We need to look at it. Mean time to repair. If you find defects and you've got a 24-hour turnaround, is development really meeting that 24-hour turnaround? Or are they is it on average taking them 2 days to repair a defect? And that's a money cost. So you need to look at what the mean time to repair is. How many approved change requests have happened? So if we go through our requirements, we do our reviews, we work off all of the defects found in the inspections or reviews, and we approve the requirements. Then we get into design, and there are 50 change requests submitted while we're in design. Well, what's wrong? What did we miss in requirements? So approved change requests tell us what the quality is throughout the life cycle. Performance, technical performance, and measures specified by customer and management. So we've got our performance as testers. Then management and the customer is wanting certain measures. Are we providing them to them? If we're not, we're not doing our job. We need to keep in mind that we've got other people out there that need our measures. So time and cost, unit cost, what's it costing us to run each test case? Cost to fix defects, time to completion, and risk. What's the probability of exceeding constraints and not meeting requirements? Well, one thing we need to look at is what's the risk? Because a lot of times we're doing risk-based testing, and that's what we need to look at. Security. If you're not looking at security now during testing, you're missing the boat, and it's going to come back and bite you. I can tell you right now. Just look at all of the infiltrations and the number of databases that have been hacked. And we need, as testers, we need to look at security. We need to make sure there are security requirements that are documented and that we test. So we have got to look at security. And you're going to buy some money, as you're going to buy some value as testers if you are looking at security. You're going to get some pushback probably from the security department, but when you can show them that you're helping them keep the system safer, then you're going to be right there and you're going to have a lot of good value. So we've got all these measures, we've got all these metrics that we've been calculating and collecting. So how do we present the data Remember I said earlier it has to be easily understood and it has to be timely. Well, and I found that the best way is dashboards. Everybody knows how to read a dashboard on a car. So let's make it easy on people and present the data in a dashboard at a glance so they can look at the data and the metrics at a glance. And so we're going to give them a set of charts that give them information. Now, what you've got to be able to do is if they click on a specific item in that dashboard because they want to know more in-depth information, then if they click on that instrument or that set of data on the dashboard, then they can get all the detailed data they want. Let them have fun, but let's present it to them in a dashboard format, and if we can make it real time, all the better, because you never know when somebody in senior management is going to say, hey, wait a minute, this system, I need to know what how far along testing is and whether we're going to meet our schedule. Well, they need to be able to go into this information system, click on the dashboard and go, oh yeah, they are 85% through. We're right on time. It shows this is our scheduled completion date and this is our projected date based on where they are now. So the dashboard's going to show them. So how do we present the data? That's for you to decide, because you know your audience and you're going to present the data based on your audience. So a pie chart, that is one of the things that I found people can look at, they can understand very easily, is a pie chart. So let's give it to them. If that's what they're used to, what they want, give it to them. Histograms. Everybody knows what a histogram is. Well, a histogram is nothing more than a bar chart that has been rearranged to go from high to low or low to high. So that's a histogram. So we've got a bar chart. Well, a lot of people can read a bar chart very easily. So if that's what they're comfortable with, give it to them. Cost-benefit analysis. This one you're not going to use as much, but it's very useful in cost benefits. And remember the money aspect. So you need to think about doing a cost-benefit analysis. Flowchart. Everybody can read a flowchart, but this is one of the most forgotten ways to present data on a dashboard is a flowchart. Spreadsheet. You've got a Pareto chart. Well, they may not know what a Pareto chart really is by name, but they know it when they see it, because all this is you're presenting when do I expect to start something, when do I expect to complete it, and what was my actual time frames. So everybody knows how to read a Pareto chart. Just keep that in mind. Cause and effect analysis, this you're not going to do, put on a dashboard. But you're going to keep it in your back pocket to come up with, oh, we got a problem. You're going to use cause and effect analysis to figure out what we're doing here. Control charts. Again, this is something that you're probably not going to put on there unless you're in manufacturing. You can use it in other applications. I've done it, but it takes some explanation to let people understand a control chart, but they're useful. And you've got a PERT chart. Okay. Now, what testing forgets? They tend to focus on testing metrics. Well, duh, we're the testing organization, so we should focus on it. But you forget the management metrics, and that's going to get you. And you don't give timely feedback. You wait for somebody to come and ask you for feedback. So by doing that, you forget to develop a dashboard. And so you need to get this dashboard out there to give timely feedback. How do measurements improve the test process? This is what we started out with on our title of this webinar. So, measurements and metrics provide management with proof of ROI that improve the business value, provide real-time status information shown in easy-to-read dashboards, identify successes, because you want to shout your successes, let me tell you. Identify problems, and if you can show problems before they become really major showstoppers, you're going to be a hero. And as long as they believe that your information is valid, they're going to believe you. And you're going to improve customer satisfaction. Measurement benefits. It helps understand the process. Ensure decisions are based on fact. Show where improvements are needed. And show if improvements actually happened. And improve quality. Now, I want to remind you that you can hear me. If you liked what I presented, come see me on September 13th at the Sheraton San Diego. I've got a one-day tutorial on running a high-performance testing, leading a test organization with a high-performance test team. So be happy to have you there. And if you think of any questions that after you get off of here and think, I should have asked him so-and-so, well, send me an email at this address. Be sure to reference this webinar in your subject line, and I'll be happy to answer your questions. And just want to remind you that IIST is a full-service organization. So if you need public training, online training, on-site training, shoot, you may get me in that thing. And I'd be happy to provide those services for you. So Eric, are you there?
Yes, Tom.
Eric doesn't appear to be.
No, I'm here.
Okay, there you are.
Microphone issues, but no. But thank you, Tom, for your time today, and thank you to everyone for joining us for today's webinar, sponsored by IIST, the leaders in education-based certifications and training. For more information on how IIST can help you or your organization, please visit www.iist.org. You can follow IIST on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube to find out more information about IIST news, events, and promotions. Thank you all again for joining us today, and have a great day.
Thank you.